The cold night rain hammered down, each drop a sharp, staccato rhythm on the cracked asphalt. Jamal Turner stood beneath a flickering streetlight, the dull yellow glow struggling against the darkness that pressed in from every side. The wet pavement shimmered like broken glass, reflecting distorted images of the world around him. He pulled his soaked jacket tighter, the damp chill seeping through the fabric and creeping into his bones. Around him, the city seemed to hold its breath. The usual buzz of life, horns, distant music, the chatter of passing strangers, had faded into an eerie silence. Only the relentless patter of rain and the occasional drip from an overhanging roof broke the stillness. Jamal's boots squished quietly as he shifted his weight. His breath came out in short, visible clouds misting in the cold air. He was tired. Not just from the 12-hour shift at the diner, but from the weight he carried, the constant, unseen burden of being a black man in a world that often saw him first as a threat. From the corner of his eye, Jamal caught a flash of blue and red light slicing through the foggy rain. The familiar rumble of a police cruiser grew louder, tires hissing on the slick street. His heart tightened. He had been stopped before. Not always for good reasons. Every time, it left a knot in his stomach, a lingering fear that something could go wrong without warning. The cruiser slowed to a stop a few feet away, its headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. The driver's door opened with a soft creak, and a man stepped out, boots splashing through puddles. Officer Randall Hayes adjusted his cap, water dripping from the brim. His face was stern but not angry, yet. There was a hardness in his eyes, a flicker of doubt Jamal could sense immediately. "Sir," Hayes called, his voice steady but carrying a weight Jamal felt in his chest. "Step into the light." Jamal lifted his chin and moved a step forward, the rain soaking his hair and running down his neck. He kept his hands where the officer could see, open, visible, harmless. "Good evening, officer," Jamal said, his voice calm but cautious. "Is something wrong?" Hayes studied him carefully. The streetlight revealed Jamal's tired eyes, the fine lines etched from years of worry and hard work. But to the officer he was just another man out late, another face to be judged. "You're out late in this weather?" Hayes said. "What brings you to this part of town?" Jamal's throat tightened. He wanted to answer honestly but the words felt heavy. "Just finishing my shift at Miller's Diner. Heading home." Hayes nodded slowly but there was a flicker of suspicion in his gaze. "Mind if I ask where you live?" Before Jamal could respond, the night was shattered by a sudden loud bang, a metal dumpster lid slamming shut somewhere nearby. The sound cracked through the quiet like a gunshot. Both men turned sharply toward the noise, tension rippling through the space between them. Hayes instinctively reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I heard a noise behind 5th and Main. Possible disturbance." Jamal's pulse thundered in his ears. The stories flashed through his mind, friends who'd been caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, whose lives were changed forever in seconds. "I'm not a troublemaker," Jamal said quietly. "I'm just trying to get home." Hayes took a breath, his eyes meeting Jamal's. For a moment the world seemed to slow. The rain, the noise, the flashing lights, all faded into the background. "All right, Jamal," Hayes said, his tone softer now. "Let's just talk." A flicker of surprise crossed Jamal's face. This wasn't how the night had started in his mind. But before the conversation could continue, the silence was broken again. From the shadows down the block came a sharp shout. "Hey! Stop him!" The sudden cry echoed off the buildings, cutting through the rain. Jamal's heart leapt into his throat. Hayes tensed, hand dropping from his radio to his side. Two figures burst into the glow of the streetlight, their faces blurred but urgent. Jamal took a step back. Hayes shouted, "Hold on. Stay where you are." The tension snapped like a stretched wire. Everything held in a fragile balance. The rain poured relentlessly, a cold, unforgiving curtain draping over the empty street. Jamal Turner's heart hammered in his chest, pounding louder than the drops striking the pavement. Every instinct screamed for caution, but he remained rooted, exposed beneath the flickering streetlight's pale glow. The sudden movement ahead shattered the fragile quiet. Two figures emerged from the darkness, soaked through, their clothes clinging to their bodies, faces set with urgency and accusation. The tall man, hoodie pulled low and soaked from the storm, fixed Jamal with a pointed finger. "That's him right there. I saw him dart behind my store a few minutes ago, looking real suspicious." Jamal's breath hitched. His mouth opened, ready to speak, but the weight of suspicion crushed the words before they could escape. Years of stories rushed through his mind. Friends and strangers stopped on the street, accused without cause, lives altered by assumptions and fear. Officer Randall Hayes's voice broke through the storm's noise. Hold up, hold up. Calm down, man. I need facts, not panic. His gaze flicked from the accuser to Jamal, sharp and searching. Jamal forced himself to meet Hayes's eyes, steady despite the knot tightening in his stomach. I wasn't running. I was walking home from work like I do every night. You can call Miller's Diner if you want. Hayes's eyes narrowed slightly. You understand why I need to verify that, right? Jamal nodded, swallowing the frustration simmering beneath his calm tone. Yes, sir. I understand. The minutes stretched long and heavy. The rain grew louder, battering the pavement like a relentless drumbeat, each drop a reminder of how exposed Jamal felt. Hayes spoke quietly into his radio, giving dispatch Jamal's description and work location. Jamal's fingers clenched and unclenched, numb from the cold but trembling from tension. His eyes scanned the darkened street beyond, spotting a small group of neighbors watching silently from porches and doorways. Their faces were a mix of curiosity, concern, and distance. Among them, an elderly woman gave a subtle, knowing nod. That simple gesture steadied Jamal's frayed nerves. After a long pause, Hayes lowered his radio. Taking a step forward, he fixed Jamal with a steady gaze. Turn your pockets inside out, he said, voice firm but not harsh. Jamal obeyed, pulling out his phone, wallet, and keys, laying them carefully in his palms to show there was nothing hidden. Hayes inspected the items with a practiced eye, then gave a short nod. All right, Hayes said. Thanks for your cooperation. Relief rushed through Jamal in a hot wave, pushing back the cold night air. He exhaled deeply, releasing the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The officer's next move surprised him. Hayes extended his hand. Jamal, right? I'm Officer Hayes. Caught off guard but wary, Jamal hesitated a moment before gripping the offered hand firmly. Thanks for being honest tonight, Hayes said, his tone carrying an unexpected respect, something Jamal hadn't expected to hear on a night like this. For a brief moment, a flicker of hope ignited inside Jamal's chest, a fragile light cutting through years of fear and suspicion. But then, from the edge of the street, a shout shattered the moment. Hey, he's lying. I saw him hide something behind the dumpster. Hayes's face tightened instantly, tension snapping back into his posture. Jamal's pulse slammed hard against his ribs, adrenaline flooding his veins. The rain seemed to grow heavier, the cold sharper, the night darker. The fragile thread of calm was broken. The story was far from over. The sharp shout sliced through the rain like a sudden crack of thunder, breaking the fragile moment of uneasy calm. Jamal's muscles tightened instantly, his senses heightened by the cold night and the accusing voice. His eyes darted toward the dumpster the man had pointed to, a grimy, shadowed corner of the alley, slick with rainwater and strewn with discarded debris. Officer Randall Hayes didn't hesitate. His footsteps splashed softly on the wet pavement as he moved toward the dumpster with purposeful caution. His flashlight cut through the thick darkness, illuminating the damp concrete and discarded trash with a sharp, unforgiving beam. Jamal stood frozen in place, every heartbeat loud in his ears. The weight of years, of suspicion, judgment, and the constant fear of being misunderstood, pressed down on him heavier than the rain. He watched the tension flicker across Hayes's face, a conflict between suspicion and something else, something unfamiliar but real. Hayes crouched beside the dumpster, carefully lifting a soggy cardboard box. The rain dripped from the edges, pooling in the cracks of the pavement. His hand slid beneath the box, grasping a small plastic bag half hidden in the shadows. He pulled it out slowly, turning it over as the rain ran off the slick surface. Jamal's breath caught. The bag was empty. Hayes's eyes lifted slowly to meet Jamal's. No accusation. No bitterness. Just a silent, searching question, an unspoken apology. Nothing here, Hayes said quietly, his voice barely louder than the rain. Jamal felt his body loosen slightly, but the tension clung stubbornly, refusing to wash away completely. He swallowed hard, the familiar sting of skepticism still burning inside. Why did he say that if there's nothing? Jamal asked, voice steady but edged with weary curiosity. Hayes turned his gaze toward the accuser, standing nervously across the street. The man's face was tense, eyes flickering between the two men under the streetlight. Sometimes people see what they want to see, Hayes said slowly. Or maybe what they expect to see. Fear makes us imagine things, especially when we don't understand. Jamal nodded, the truth of that statement settling deep in his chest. He had lived this reality every day in countless interactions, fear and expectation shaping the way others saw him before they even met him. Hayes looked back at Jamal with a serious expression, the rain tracing cold lines down his face. I owe you an apology, Hayes said, voice low and sincere. Not just for tonight but for how men like you are treated far too often. It's wrong and I'm sorry. The words hung between them, weighty, rare and powerful. Jamal searched Hayes's eyes and found something he hadn't expected, honesty. A willingness to acknowledge the pain, the bias, and the systemic injustice that often shaped encounters like this one. Jamal's voice was soft but firm. I appreciate that. But this isn't just about me or even this one night. It's about every black man who's ever been stopped, judged, or worse without cause. It's about changing what people expect when they see us. Hayes nodded, his expression thoughtful as the rain continued to fall around them like a cleansing veil. The night had been a test, of courage, of patience, of trust. For both men. In that moment, beneath the flickering streetlight, something shifted. A fragile thread of understanding began to weave itself between two worlds too often divided by fear and suspicion. A small but meaningful step toward respect. A glimpse of humanity where it was least expected. Jamal looked up at the sky, rain mixing with tears he didn't quite realize he was holding back. Maybe, he said quietly, that's where change starts. Hayes nodded, offering a faint, encouraging smile. The night was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, hope had found a place to grow. The rain had softened into a steady drizzle, a gentler rhythm that whispered through the trees and puddled on the cracked sidewalks. The night air was thick with moisture and the faint scent of wet earth. The storm's roar had quieted, but the echoes of what had just transpired lingered heavy in the air. Between Jamal Turner and Officer Randall Hayes, two men standing on the edge of something fragile and new. Hayes lowered his flashlight slowly, the beam retracting from the dark alley behind the dumpster. Water dripped from the brim of his cap, tracing cold rivulets down his face and neck. He wiped his cheek with a sleeve, his eyes reflecting a weariness deeper than the night itself. Jamal, he said, voice low and careful, I've been in this job for over 10 years now. Seen things I'm not proud of. People stopped, searched, judged, sometimes for no good reason. I won't pretend I haven't made mistakes or been part of that system that often fails to see the person behind the skin. He shifted his weight, boots splashing quietly in the pooling rainwater. It's a hard system to fix. One built on fear, assumptions, and history. And sometimes I feel stuck in it like I'm just one small part of a machine that's bigger than me. Jamal listened, the words stirring a mix of emotions inside him. He thought about every time he'd been stopped, every look that lingered too long, every step taken cautiously because trust wasn't a given. The history Hayes spoke of wasn't just the past, it was a living thing shaping every moment. It's not just a system, Jamal said softly. It's a legacy. For us, it's generations of fear and distrust, of being seen as threats even when we're just trying to live, to work, to be. He looked into Hayes's eyes, searching for a flicker of understanding beyond duty and protocol. But it's also about hope. About the people who want to change that legacy. People like you, maybe? Hayes nodded slowly, the weight of those words settling between them. I want to do better. I want to treat every person with respect. But it's hard. Sometimes I don't know where to start. How do you change a system that's been broken for so long? Jamal's breath came steady, the rain tracing lines down his jacket. It starts here. In moments like this. When you stop seeing me as a suspect, and start seeing me as a man. When you listen to my story instead of just my face. He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. You took a step tonight, Officer Hayes. And steps like that, small as they seem, they matter. They build trust. Hayes looked out into the street, past the empty benches and shuttered storefronts. The neighborhood was quiet now, the distant sounds of a dog barking, a car's muffled engine, and the faint murmur of voices weaving through the night. A few neighbors had crept closer, faces shadowed but attentive, watching a moment of change unfold before them. Across the street, the man who had accused Jamal stood silently, no longer shouting, no longer pointing fingers. His body language had shifted from confrontation to contemplation. Others who had watched from porches and doorways were now stepping forward hesitantly, curiosity and hope mingling in their eyes. Hayes turned back to Jamal. I want to do more than just this one stop. I want to build trust in this community. Maybe hold meetings, listen to people's stories, learn how to be better. It won't fix everything overnight, but it's a start. Jamal's heart stirred with cautious optimism. If you do that, I'll be there. So will others. We all want the same thing, to feel safe, to be seen, to be treated with dignity. Hayes smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through the cold night. Maybe this rain isn't just washing away the dirt. Maybe it's clearing a path. Maybe it'll help something grow. Jamal looked up at the sky, raindrops mixing with tears he hadn't expected to shed. Maybe it will. They shook hands again, this time with a newfound respect and a shared understanding. Not just two men bridging a divide, but a symbol of what real change looks like. Messy, difficult, and painfully slow, but possible. As the night stretched on, the rain softened to a mist, and the city seemed to breathe a little easier. Under the flickering streetlight, surrounded by watching neighbors and the quiet hum of a sleeping world, a seed was planted. A seed of hope. A seed of respect. A seed of healing. And somewhere deep in their hearts, both men knew the journey was only beginning. The morning after the rainstorm, the neighborhood woke slowly beneath a tentative sun breaking through lingering gray clouds. The streets, still shimmering with puddles, seemed quieter somehow, as if the city itself was catching its breath. For Jamal Turner, the night's heavy tension still weighed on his chest, but now it was mixed with something unfamiliar, cautious hope. He stepped out onto the porch of his modest home, the air fresh and cool, carrying the faint scent of wet asphalt and damp grass. Neighbors who passed by glanced his way, some offering nods or brief smiles, gestures small, yet meaningful after years of distance and silence. At the corner store, Mrs. Lawson, an elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood for decades, pulled Jamal aside. "I heard what happened last night," she said softly, her eyes kind but wary. "It's not often you see something like that. I'm glad you're okay." Jamal nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "Thank you, ma'am. It was unexpected." Stories of the encounter began to ripple through the community. At local barbershops, church gatherings, and community centers, people spoke in hushed tones about the unusual respect shown by Officer Hayes, a police officer who, for once, listened instead of accusing, who saw a man rather than a suspect. For many residents, this small act was a beacon in a long night of mistrust and pain. It was a reminder that change, however slow, was possible. Meanwhile, Officer Randall Hayes found himself haunted by the events of that rainy night. His usual patrols felt different. He noticed things he hadn't before, the wary looks from residents, the stories whispered behind closed doors. He understood, more deeply than ever, the scars left by years of injustice. Determined to do better, Hayes began taking quiet but deliberate steps. He reached out to neighborhood leaders, attending meetings not just as an officer but as a listener. He sought to understand the fears and frustrations that had built up over generations. The conversations were often uncomfortable. Some voices were filled with anger. Others with cautious skepticism. But Hayes listened. Jamal, too, stepped forward, finding his voice in the community conversations. Sharing his experience was not easy. Each word carried the weight of past wounds and present hopes. But he spoke honestly about the fear, the pain, and the glimmers of respect he had seen. Together they began to build bridges, fragile at first but growing stronger with each dialogue. It was clear the road ahead was long, filled with setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. The legacy of mistrust did not disappear overnight. Yet in those moments, Jamal and Hayes found a shared purpose. The encounter in the rain had planted a seed, of respect, of understanding, and of the possibility for healing. The neighborhood, once divided by fear and suspicion, began to see glimmers of change. Neighbors started greeting officers with guarded but genuine nods. Community meetings grew in attendance, with voices joining to demand better, to demand respect. The story of Jamal and Officer Hayes became more than just a tale of one rainy night. It became a symbol, a reminder of what happens when people choose humanity over suspicion, listening over judgment. It was a symbol of courage. The courage to face hard truths. The courage to change. And most importantly, the courage to believe that justice and respect could someday be more than just words. Months have passed since that rainy night, since Jamal Turner and Officer Randall Hayes stood together in the downpour, two men from different worlds finding a fragile moment of respect and understanding. But what happened then was not just a single event frozen in time. It was the beginning of something much bigger, a journey that continues to unfold, step by difficult step. Jamal's story no longer belongs to just himself. It has become a voice echoing through the neighborhood, through communities far beyond the street where it happened. He speaks openly at community centers, schools, and forums, not to claim a victory but to challenge us all to look deeper. To confront the reality that respect is not a privilege granted but a fundamental right owed to every person, regardless of the color of their skin. He reminds us that fear and mistrust have been bred over generations by experiences that are too often ignored or dismissed. That real change requires honest conversation and action that goes beyond words. Officer Hayes too has carried the weight of that night with him. He has pushed past the routine of his daily patrols and taken deliberate steps toward transformation, not just within himself but within the police force. He has championed training that teaches empathy, cultural understanding, and the importance of seeing people, not just suspects. He has listened, truly listened, to voices that have been silenced too long. He has shown up in spaces where police and community rarely meet, striving to build trust one conversation at a time. But both men know the road ahead is long and often uncertain. The wounds inflicted by systemic injustice don't heal overnight. The biases woven into institutions and minds require relentless courage to dismantle. Their story, however, is a beacon, a proof that change is possible when people choose to see each other's humanity first. This story is not just theirs. It's ours. It calls on every one of us to ask, what will you do when you witness injustice? How will you stand up for dignity and respect in your own community? Will you choose to listen and learn even when it's uncomfortable? Will you be the spark that turns a moment of respect into a movement for justice? The journey toward equality and understanding is imperfect. It is hard. It requires us to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world we live in. But it also offers hope. Hope born from the courage of those who dare to bridge divides. We invite you to be part of that hope. Share this story. Talk about it with your family, friends, neighbors. Support efforts to build stronger, more just communities. Most importantly, reflect on how your actions, your words, and your choices can make a difference. Subscribe to Crime and Justice Stories. Join the conversation. Become a voice for change. Because respect and justice cannot wait. Because everyone deserves to be seen and heard. Because your voice, your action matters. Together we keep the story alive. Together we build a future where humanity and dignity are the foundation for us all.